Hey, well, this is part three. This might be a little bit longer because I'm not sleepy right now, at least. I was watching Petticoat Junction on, we got a channel called MeTV out of Chattanooga. Has all the old shows on there. It has MASH. It used to have Welcome Back Carter, Mr. Carter. And I hadn't seen that since I was a kid. But anyway, oh, I'm sorry, Herb. I'll give you a piece of grape. Shame on me. Okay, so let's get right to it, shall we? Question 5 still. And what is that, Herb? Somebody on a motorcycle. Question 8 is pretty long too. Hey, hush. Okay. Okay. Hey. You hear somebody goes nuts. Alright. Okay. Alright, okay. Alright. Number 3. The so-called thousands of changes. Suppose someone were to take you to a museum to see an original copy of their King James Version. Hey! You come to the glass case where the Bible is displayed and look down at the open Bible through the glass. Herbie. Although you're not allowed to flip through its pages, you can readily tell that there are some very different things about this Bible from the one you own. From the one you own. You can hardly read its words, and those you can make out are spelled in odd and strange ways. Like others before you, you leave with an impression that the King James Bible version has undergone a multitude of changes since its original printing in 1611. But beware, you have just been taken by a very clever ploy. The differences you saw are not what they seem to be. Let's examine the evidence. For proper examination, the changes can be divided into 3 kinds: printing changes, spelling changes, and textual changes. Printing changes will be considered first. The type style used in 1611 by the King James KJV translators was the Gothic type style. This type style you are reading now and are familiar with is Roman type. Gothic type is sometimes called Germanic because it originated in Germany. Remember, that is where printing was invented, in Germany. The Gothic letters were formed to resemble the hand-drawn manuscript lettering in the Middle Ages. At first, it was the only style in use. The Roman type style was invented fairly early, but many years passed before it became the predominant style in most European countries. Gothic continued to be used in Germany until the recent years. Did you know that? In 1611 in England, Roman type was already very popular and would soon supersede the Gothic. However, the original printers chose the Gothic style for the KJV because it was considered to be the more beautiful and eloquent than the Roman. What's this? Oh, a little interesting. Little thing. Tell me. Let's see what it said here. Thank you, Butch. Vince. Little receipt there. Got another one in yesterday. I got about 10 of these all together. I'm discreetly very carefully, handing them out to certain people. Okay, back to what I was reading here. Let's see here. Not long ago. But the change to Roman type was not long in coming. In 1612, the first King James Version using Roman type was printed. Within a few years, all the Bibles printed used the Roman type style. Please realize that a change in type style no more alters the text of the Bible than a change in format or type size does. However, the modern reader who has not become familiar with Gothic can find it very difficult to understand. Besides, some general change in form, several specific letter changes needed to be observed. For instance, the Gothic looked like the Romans when used as a capital letter or at the end of the word. But when it is used as a lowercase s at the beginning or in the middle of a word, the letter looks like or F. Therefore, also becomes alpho, and set becomes fet. Another variation is found in the German V and U. The Gothic V looks like a Roman U, while the Gothic U looks like a Roman V. Oh, I thought I saw one person looking. This explains why our W is what's called a double U, not a double V. Sound confusing? It is until you get used to it. In the 1611 edition, love is lo, us is vis, ever is ever with a U, But remember, these are not even spelling changes. These are simply type style changes. In another instance, the Gothic J looks like R-I, so Jesus would be called Ephus, I-E-F-U-S. That's the way it looks anyway. Notice the middle S change to F, and joy becomes Oi, I-O-Y. Even the Gothic D with the stem leaning back over the circle in a shape resembling that of a Greek delta. These changes for a large percentage of the thousands of changes in the King James Version, these changes account for a large percentage of the thousands of changes in the King James Version, yet they do not harm whatsoever to the text. They do no harm whatsoever to the text. They are nothing more than a smokescreen set up by the attackers of our English Bible. Spelling changes. Another kind of change found in the history of the Authorized Version are changes in orthography or spelling. Most histories date the beginning of modern English around the year 1500. Okay, you heard that right. Modern English around 1500. Not archaic or pre-modern English, modern English around 1500. Therefore, by 1611, the grammatical structure and basic vocabulary of everyday English had long been established. However, the spelling did not stabilize at the same time. In the 1600s, spelling was according to whim. There was no such thing as correct spelling. No standards had been established. An author often spelled the same word several different ways, often in the same book and sometimes on the same page, and these were the educated people. Some of you reading this today would have found the 1600s a spelling paradise. Not until the 18th century did the spelling begin to take a stable form. Therefore, in the last half of the 18th century, the spelling of the King James Version of 1611 was standardized. What kind of spelling variations can you expect to find between your present edition and the 1611 printing? Although every spelling difference cannot be categorized, several characteristics are very common. Additional E's were often found at the end of the words such as fear, dark, and bear. Also, double vowels were much more common than they are today. You would find E, B, mood with two O's instead of me, be, and mood. Double consonants were also much more common. What would ran, evil, and stars be according to the present day spelling? With two N's, two L's, and so forth, and R's. See if you can figure them out. The present day spellings would be ran, evil, and stars. These typographical and spelling changes account for almost of all of the so-called thousands of changes in the King James Bible. None of them alter the text in any way. Therefore, they cannot be honestly compared with thousands of true textual changes which are blatantly made in the modern versions. Are we still going here? Okay. Alright. Textual changes. Almost all of the altered changes, alleged changes rather, have been accounted for. We now come to the question of actual textual differences between our present editions and that of the 1611. There are some differences between the two, but they are not the changes of a revision. They are instead the correction of early printing errors. That is a fact may be seen in three things: the character of the changes, the frequency of the changes throughout the Bible, and the time the changes were made. First, let us look at the character of the changes made from the time of the first printing of the Authorized English Bible. The changes from the 1611 edition that are admittedly textual are obviously printing errors because of the nature of these changes. They are not textual changes made to alter the reading. In the first printing, words were sometimes inverted. Sometimes a plural was written as a singular and vice versa. At times, a word was miswritten for one that was similar. A few times, a word or even a phrase was omitted. The omissions were obvious and did not have the doctrinal implications of those found in modern translations. In fact, there is really no comparison between the corrections made in the King James text and those proposed by the scholars of today. F.H.A. Scrivener, in the appendix of his book, lists the variations between the 1611 edition of the King James Version and the later printings. A sample of these corrections is given below. In order to be objective, the samples give the first textual correction on consecutive left-hand pages of Scrivener's book. The 1611 reading is given first, then the present reading, and finally the date the correction was made. So they got the 1611 first, then the present edition, and the date that was made. This thing was changed to this thing also, 1638. Shall have remained was changed to ye shall have remained, 1762. Agzib, nor Helbath, nor Aphic was changed to of Agzib, nor of Helbath, nor of Aphic, in 1762. Requite good was changed to requite me good in 1629. This book of the covenant was changed to the book of this covenant, 1629. Chief rulers was changed to chief ruler, 1629. And Parpar was changed to at Parpar, 1638. Parvar, rather. For this cause was changed to and for this cause at 1638. For the king had appointed was changed to for so the king had appointed in 1629. Seek good was changed to seek God, who is good, at 1617. The comrade was changed to but the comrade, 1629. Return was changed to turn in 1769. A fiery furnace was changed to a burning fiery furnace, 1638. The crown was changed, thy crown, 1629. Thy right doeth was changed to thy right hand doeth, 1613. The wayside was changed to the wayside in 1743. which was a Jew, was changed to which was a Jewess, 1629. The city was changed to the city of the Damascenes in 1629. Now and forever, now and ever rather, was changed to both now and ever, 1638. Which was of our fathers was changed to which was our fathers rather, 1616. Before your eyes are 5% of the textual changes made in the King James Version in 375 years. Even if they were not corrections of previous errors, they would be of no comparison to modern alterations. But they are corrections of printing errors, and therefore no comparison is at all possible. Look at the list for yourself, and you will find only one that has serious doctrinal implications. In fact, in an examination of Scribner's entire appendix is the only variation found by this author that could be accused of being doctrinal. I'm referring to Psalm 69:32, where the 1611 edition has "seek God," when the Bible should have read "seek good" instead of "seek God." Yet even with this error, 2 points demonstrate that this was indeed a printing error. First, the similarity of the words "good" and "God" in spelling show that how easily a weary typesetter could misread the proof and put the wrong word in the text. Second, this error was so obvious that it was caught and corrected in the year 1617, only 6 years after the original printing and well before the first so-called revision. The myth that there are several major revisions of the 1611 King James Bible should be getting clear. Well, it says King James Version, KJV, but there's more. Not only does the character of the changes show them to be printing errors, so does their frequency. Fundamentalist scholars refer to the thousands of revisions made to the 1611 as if they were on a par with the recent Bible versions. They are not. The overwhelming majority of them are either type, style, or spelling changes. The few which do remain are clearly corrections of printing errors made because of the tediousness involved in the early printing process. The sample list given above will demonstrate just how careful Scrivener was in listing all the variations. Yet, even with this great care, only approximately 400 variations are named between the 1611 edition and the modern copies. Remember that there were 100 variations between the first two Oxford editions, which were both printed in 1611. Since there are almost 1,200 chapters in the Bible, the average variation per chapter after 375 years is 1/3. Okay, i.e. one correction per every 3 chapters. These are changes such as chief rulers to chief ruler and parbar to parbar. But there is yet one more evidence that these variations are simply corrected printing errors. Corrected printing errors. The early date at which they were corrected. The character and frequency of textual changes clearly separate them from the modern alterations. By the time that the changes were made settles the issue absolutely. The great majority of the 400 corrections were made within a few years of the original printing. Take, for example, our earlier sampling. Of the 20 corrections listed, one was made in 1613, one in 1616, one in 1617, 8 in 1629, 5 in 1638, one in 1743, 2 in 1762, and 1 in 1769. That means that 16 out of 20 corrections, or 80%, were made within 27 years of the King James of the 1611 printing. That is hardly the long drawn out series of revisions the scholars would have you to believe. In another study made by examining every other page of Scrivener's appendix in detail, 72% of the textual corrections were made by 1638. There is no revision issue. The character of the textual changes is that of the obvious errors. The frequency of the textual changes is sparse, occurring only one per 3 chapters. The chronology of the textual changes is early, with about 3/4 of them occurring within 27 years of the first printing. All of these details establish the fact that there were no true revisions in the sense of updating the language or correcting translation errors. There were only additions which corrected early typographical errors. Our source of authority for the exact wording of the 1611 Authorized Version is not in the existing copies of the first printing. Our source of authority for the exact wording of our English Bible is in the preserving power of Almighty God. Just as God did not leave us the original autographs to fight and squabble over, so he did not see fit to leave us a proof copy of the translation. Our authority is in the hand of God as always. You can praise the Lord for that. Section 4. Changes in the book of Ecclesiastes. An in-depth study of the changes made in the book of Ecclesiastes would help to illustrate the principles stated above. The author is grateful to Dr. David Reese of Millbrook, Alabama, for his work in this area. By comparing a 1611 reprint of the original edition put out by Thomas Nelson and Sons with recent printing of the King James Version, Dr. Reese was able to locate 4 variations in the book of Ecclesiastes. The reference is given first, then the text of Thomas Nelson reprint, then is followed by the reading of the present editions of the King James Version, 1611 King James, and the date the changes was made. The reference is given first, then the text of Thomas Nelson. Okay. Let's see here. Then the text of Thomas Nelson reprint. This is followed by the reading of the present edition of the 1611. Okay, and the date that which change was made. All right. So 1.5, the place, which changed to his place, 1638. 2.16, shall all be, 1629. Let's see here. 8:17, out ye further unto out he shall not find it, yea farther, 1629. 11:17, thing it is thing is it, to thing it is. Didn't have a year on that one. A bit confusing. I didn't know what the chapter and verses were. Oh, wait a minute. That was Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 1:5, the place to his place, 1638. Duh me. Ecclesiastes 2:16, shall be to shall all be, 1629. Ecclesiastes 8:17, out yea further, to out yet shall he not find it, yea farther, 1629. Ecclesiastes 11:17, thing is it, to thing it is. No year. Several things should be noted about these changes. The last variation, thing is it to thing it is not mentioned by Scrivener, who was a very careful and accurate scholar. Therefore, this change may be a misprint in the Thomas Nelson reprint. That would be interesting. The corrected omission in chapter 8 is one of the longest corrections of the original printing. But notice that it was corrected in 1629. The frequency of printing errors is average 4 errors in 12 chapters. But the most outstanding fact is that the entire book of Ecclesiastes reads exactly like our present editions without even printing errors by the year 1638. That's approximately 350 years ago. Wow. By that time, the Bible was being printed in Roman. Therefore, all, and I mean all, that has changed in 350 years in the book of Ecclesiastes, as the spelling has been standardized. As stated before, the main purpose of the 1629 and 1638 Cambridge edition was the correction of earlier printing errors, and the main purpose of the 1762 and 1769 editions was the standardization of spelling. Section 5, the so-called justification for other revisions. Maybe now you see that the King James Version of 1611 has not been revised but only corrected. But why does it make that much difference? Okay. Although there are several reasons why this issue is important, the most pressing one is that fundamentalist scholars are using this myth of past revision to justify their own tampering with the text. The editors of the New King James Version have probably been the worst in recent years to use this propaganda ploy. In the preface of the New King James Version, they have stated, for nearly 400 years and throughout several revisions of its English form, the King James Bible has been... Ooh, Herbie. Checking. The King James Bible has been deeply revered among the English-speaking peoples of the world. In the midst of their flowery rhetoric, they strongly imply that their edition is only a continuation of the revisions that have been going on for the past 375 years. This implication, which has been stated directly by others, would not be more false. To prove this point, we will go back to the book of Ecclesiastes. Boy, my eyes are getting dry. An examination of the first chapter of Ecclesiastes in the New King James Version reveals approximately 50 changes from our present edition. In order to be fair, spelling changes cometh to comes, labor to laborer, without the unit, etc., were not included in this account. That means there are probably about 600 alterations in the book of Ecclesiastes and approximately 600,000 changes in the entire Bible. If you accuse me of including every recognizable change, you are correct. But I am only counting the sort of changes which were identified in analyzing the King James, 1611 King James. That's only fair. Still, the number of changes is especially baffling for a version which claims to be an updating in the same vein as earlier revisions. According to the fundamental scholar, the New King James is only a fifth in a series of revisions. Wow. Let's take a break here. All right. Then pray tell me how 4 revisions in 375 years brought only 400 changes, while the 5th revision brought 60,000 additional changes. That means that the 5th revision made 150 times more changes than the total number of changes in the first 4. That's preposterous. Not only is the frequency of the changes unbelievable, but the character of the alterations are serious. Although many of the alterations seem harmless enough at the first glance, many are much more serious. The editors of the New King James Version were sly enough to not alter the most serious blunders of modern Bibles. Yet, they were not afraid to change their reading in those places that are unfamiliar to the average fundamentalist. In these areas, the New King James Version is dangerous. Below are some of the more harmful alterations made in the book of Ecclesiastes. The reference is given first, then the reading as found in the King James Version, and at last the reading as found in the New King James Version. So the reference, which is first the chapter and the verse, and then the King James Version to the New King James Version. Let me make sure that was it. My eyes are getting pasty. The reference is given first, then the reading as found in the King James Version, and the last reading is found in the New King James Version. Okay, so Ecclesiastes 1:13 went from the King James Version, sore travail, to grievous task of the New King James Version. Bend this down here a little bit. You don't mind if I get a grape? Thank you. You want grape too? There you go. All right. Kind of weird, like, you know. All right. Ecclesiastes 1:14. Vexation of spirit was changed to the New King James Version, grasping for the wind. What? Ecclesiastes 1:16. My heart had great experience of wisdom. Too, my heart has understood great wisdom. Ecclesiastes 2:3. Excuse me about that. I got a grape stuck in my throat. Hello, one person. How you doing? Ecclesiastes 2:3. To give myself unto, to gratify myself with. To the New King James Version. Acquainting, to guiding. 2:21. Equity, to skill. Ecclesiastes 3:10, the travail which God hath given to the New King James Version, the God-given task. Okay. Ecclesiastes 3:11, the world to eternity. That's not the same thing. If I may. The world is the people who live on the earth. And just like the earth and the world aren't the same thing. The world is the civilization of people who are on the earth. And the earth is, of course, the earth itself, the planet we live on. The world is not the earth. The world is the people upon the earth, the civilizations upon the earth. God created the worlds. Therefore, He created mankind, civilizations, and those within the first world and the world to come after. Oh, let's see here. That God might manifest them, to God test them. Ecclesiastes 3:18. They themselves are beasts. 3:18. They themselves are like beasts. Ecclesiastes 3:22, portion to heritage, to the New King James heritage. Ecclesiastes 4:4, King James Version, right work, to New King James Version, skillful work. Ecclesiastes 5:11, keep thy foot, to walk prudently, New King James Version. Ecclesiastes 5:6, the angel to the messenger of God. Ecclesiastes 5:6 again, thy voice to your excuse. Wow. That's really far-fetched, isn't it? From thy voice in the New King James, in the King James Version to your excuse in the New King James Version. Wow. 5:8 Ecclesiastes, he that is higher than the highest to high official in New King James Version. Wow. Ecclesiastes 5:20, God answereth him to New King James Version. God keeps him busy. Huh? That doesn't make sense. Ecclesiastes 6:3, untimely birth to stillborn child. That has nothing to do with a stillborn child. Untimely birth could be anything as far as being born a little too early or not being born at a time when he should have been born because something might be happening. That doesn't mean the child's stillborn. New King James Version is crazy. Ecclesiastes 7:29, inventions to schemes. Not every invention is a scheme. Inventions are inventions. Schemes are totally different. Ecclesiastes 1, from boldness to sternness. Ecclesiastes 8:10, the place of the holy, the places of holiness. Ecclesiastes 10:1, dead flies cause omen of the apothecary to send forth its stinking savor. 2, dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment. Ecclesiastes 10:10, if the iron be blunt, if the axe be dull. Excuse me. Wisdom is profitable to direct. To wisdom brings success. Ecclesiastes, that was 10:10 as well. Ecclesiastes 12:9, give good heed. To the New King James Version, pondered. How many minutes we got? 12:11, Ecclesiastes 12:11, the masters of assemblies to scholars. That ain't got nothing to do with the masters of assemblies. This is only a sampling of the changes in the book, but notice, oh wow, almost done. Notice what is done. Equity, which is a trait of godliness, becomes skill in 2:21. The word becomes eternity in 3:11. Man without God is no longer a beast, but just like a beast. 3:18. The clear reference to deity in Ecclesiastes 5:8, he that is higher than the highest, is successfully removed to higher official. But since success is what wisdom is supposed to bring us, 10:10, this must be progress. At least God is keeping the scholars busy. In verse 5:20, probably the most revealing of the above mentioned changes is that the last one listed, where the masters of assemblies become scholars. That's what I was saying. According to the New King James Version, the word of the scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. The masters of assemblies are replaced by the scholars, who become the source of the shepherd's words. That is what these scholars would like us to think, but it is not true. In conclusion, the New King James is not a revision in the vein of former revisions of the King James Version. It is instead an entirely new translation. As stated in the introduction, the purpose of this book is not to convince those who use the other versions. It's not to convince those who use other versions. The purpose of this book is to expose a fallacious argument that has been circulating in fundamentalist circles for what it is, an overblown myth. That is the myth that the New King James Version and others like it are nothing more than a continuation of revisions. Let's see if I can put this down a little bit. Okay. Let's see. A continuation of revisions which have periodically been made to the King James Version. Been made to the King James Version since 1611. There revisions made to the King James Version since 1611. There is one problem with this theory. There are no such revisions. The King James Bible of 1611 has not undergone 4 or any major revisions. Therefore, the New King James Version is not a continuation of what has gone on before. It should in fact be called the Thomas Nelson Version. That's exactly what it is. They hold the copyright. The King James Version we have today has not been revised, but purified. We still have no reason to doubt that the Bible we hold in our hands is the very Word of God, preserved for us in the English language. The authority for its veracity lies not in the first printing of the King James Version in 1611, or in the character of King James I, or in the scholarship of the 1611 translators, or in the literary accomplishments of Elizabethan England, or even in the Greek received text. Or authority for the infallible words of the English Bible lies in the power and promise of God to preserve His Word. God has the power. We have His Word. Individual copies of Dr. Reagan's excellent pamphlet can be obtained by sending $1 to certain place which no longer has it. I didn't already look. So, there we go. We got all through all of that in 42 minutes. And with that being said, the battery's dying on my thing here, but I got enough time to get to question 6. Question 6 says, don't the best manuscripts support the new versions? Well, that's interesting. No, the best manuscripts support the Bible, the authorized version. And they do. I've seen some of them. I'm sorry, let me just shut up. Explanation: the new versions are only supported by about 5 over 5,000 manuscripts of the Bible text. Bible text. Critics of the Bible claim that these manuscripts are better than those used by the translators of the authorized version. This is not so. The two most prominent of these, Vaticanus, which is sole property of the Roman Catholic Church, and Sinaiticus, are both known to be overwhelmed with errors. It is said that Sinaiticus had been corrected and altered by many as 10 different writers, and you can also see David W. Daniels' videos on Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. Me and him are not really in good cahoots. Friendship is a long story, but he does have a lot of information on that. Sadly, between me and us, that's between our, that's our problem. But anyway, let's see here. And Vaticanus has found the evidence of very sloppy workmanship. And what it is Constantine Simonides wrote a copy of a certain scripture for the Tsar of Russia or something like that, and he left it in the, over there next to Mount Sinai, the monastery in Mount Sinai, and so Constantine Tischendorf comes in and says, "Hey, look at here, what is all this? It looks like old ancient manuscripts. Oh, look what I found! It was in a trash can." No, it was previously written, doofus. The tale of 2 Constantines. Well, actually 3, because there's a Constant, there's a monk or something like that. But anyway, look at David W. Daniels' video on chicktracks.com. You'll see a Chick Tracks channel on there. Let's see here. Time and again, the words and whole phrases are repeated twice in succession or completely omitted. while the entire manuscript has been had the text mutilated by some person or persons who ran over every letter with a pen, making exact identification of many of the characters impossible. Exact identification of many of the characters impossible. Both manuscripts contain uninspired, anti-scriptural books which are not found in the Bible. The only place where these errors are laden, unreliable manuscripts excel is in the quality of the materials used on them. They have good bindings and fine animal skin pages. Their physical appearance, contrary to their worthless texts, are really rather attractive. And all he did was put lemon juice on it and ate it. But then we have all heard the saying, you can tell a book by its cover. You can't tell a book by its cover. The covers are beautiful, but their texts are reprehensible. And yet, in spite of these well-known corruptions, they are the basis for many new versions, such as the New American Standard Version and the New International Version, rendering these versions critically flawed and unreliable. The manuscripts represented by the King James Bible have texts of the highest quality. So we see that the best manuscripts are those used by the King James translators. Well, with that being said, question 7 is coming up, and that's pretty short. And then you got question 8. That's a little bit longer. So now we're finished with question 2, and we also got question 6 in. So the next one will be question 7 on part 4. Hope this has helped you in some way. I'm done right now. Kind of getting sleepy and the phone's dying. So God bless and see you later. Hope you got something out of this. And we'll see you next trip. Bye-bye.